Humankind's Together We Rule, the first expansion, launches tomorrow. And in this video, I'm going to give you a first look, an early look at all of the things that we're getting. These are the main things that are coming in Humankind's Diplomacy expansion DLC. Enabled in the main menu, the first thing that you'll notice, and I'll try and introduce these concepts somewhat chronologically, will be that there's a new type of culture in Humankind. It's the Diplomat culture. And this one is focused around generating and collecting a new yield that appears on the map called Leverege or Leverege. More on that in a little bit. They also have an ability called Demilitarization, which generates those leverages and causes enemy units in a territory that you choose to demilitarize to take damage for 10 turns. Overall, they're a very interesting type, obviously more of a peaceful type of culture than many others. There's one of these cultures introduced into every era of humankind, and in the ancient era, it's the Sumerians, who, I must say, by the way, also have a freaking fantastic science district. Take a look at that puppy, +6 science per adjacent main plaza or administrative center. Slap it down and it's instantly like a +8, maybe even a +9 if it's got a farmer's quarter around it. This thing is powerful, and I think that the Sumerians, from my early look, are going to be a pretty decent culture in the ancient era, really starting diplomacy with a bang. Now you might be wondering, well, what's Leverege then? Well, this is what it looks like, a little chess piece, a pawn on the map. It's meant to symbolize kind of diplomatic information, intel, secrets, leverage, right? Things you can use against another empire. If you're the first one to get there with a diplomatic unit, you can pick them up, and our diplomat cultures can send any unit to collect them. You'll also notice that the neutral tribes have had a massive upgrade in Humankind. This is the new Treaties screen with them, and the new patronage system, which allows you to filter in money or influence every turn to build up a level of patronage. You can also then sign treaties with them, and some of these, especially as we move through into the later game, which I'll show you in just a second, are pretty decent. Money boosts, science boosts, and of course, sway on the global stage, because this is all about diplomacy in this expansion. You can continue to assimilate them like we used to be able to, but the new deals and arrangements really incentivize you to keep them alive, bring them in more like city-states, and less like neutral tribes that come up and disappear with no real impact. They have a powerful role right the way through the game, thanks to that client-state treaty as well. They're very interesting, and I'm looking forward to unpacking them a bit more in detail in future. But moving along into the classical era, our second new diplomat culture, of course, is Han. Again, and like you'll see throughout the whole video, every trait is about leverage actions or diplomacy, something to do with that new system. In this case, they're cheaper. We'll take a look at those actions in a minute, but it's important to note here that they receive a paper mill, which lets them create a strategic resource of paper, and their crossbows, as you can see, are powerful. They do have to rest between shooting if you want to get the real strength out of them, but they are very strong. And the fact that these guys get to make their own strategic resource on the map by building a district is very cool. Once you start to meet other players, you'll be able to construct your embassy. This is a one-time construction, a massive cultural wonder. It's built just like a holy site or a normal wonder in the game, and it enables you to use your leverage, those chess piece icons that we've been picking up and collecting throughout the game, and spend it to carry out some dastardly or helpful political actions. Here they are. There's a brand new tab. It's called the Embassy tab, and within it there are leverage actions on the left and agreements that you can sign on the right. Agreements tend to benefit both parties. I'll hover over them so you can take a look at each different one. It could be something like humanitarian aid, which buffs both players' capitals, food and industry. It could be an arms deal, where there's an exchange around emblematic units. There's some really fascinating things in those agreements that you can use to lift other empires up. Or, over on the left, you can choose to leverage them instead. Placate's a really simple one. It lowers their war support for 8 leverage points, allowing you to use your diplomatic power, or maybe those secrets you've collected, against the enemy to try and sway them from fighting you. As you move through those leverage actions, they get more and more powerful, right the way down to the economic sanctions of the contemporary era, which really restrain the opponent's economy. And everywhere else throughout the middle, you'll notice different effects. There's a theme here in that they try and focus on different areas of the game, right? So it's economy or it's diplomacy. Speaking of diplomacy, of course, that brings us through to the Bulgarians in Humankind's third era. Again, a cultural trait here around leverage, +5, against the defeated empire in a battle won if you don't lose any units. Quite a specific one. Their library provides influence and stability per territory following your state religion, and slows down the time it takes for enemies to convert you to their religion. Very interesting. This is a very interesting one. It doesn't present a lot of yield up front, but if you've got a powerful religion, which is arguably more significant now that leverage actions are in the game, could be a winner. In the early modern era to follow, we have the Swiss. Again, this one, a little different, but still based around leverage. Their district is quite fascinating, though. It's sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. If you've got farmers' quarters next to me, I'll give you more of that. Science, I'll give you more of that. Kind of a middle-of-the-road one. I do really like their unit, though. It's got a whole load of stuff to it, anti-cavalry, mercenary corps, and a defender. It's a relatively powerful one. I'm not sure how the Swiss will fit in the game, but I've barely had a chance to play with them, so I'll hold off on any opinions just yet. We'll see how they go. As we move through, we'll now see the Congress of Humankind. This is like the Embassy, but where the embassies were based on one-on-one interactions, the Congress of Humankind includes, of course, all players. These are global actions. You may, if you're like me in this game, end up being the session leader right off the bat, or it will revolve through. So everybody, or at least many people, will get a chance to have a say at what they're putting forward to the Congress. What does it look like? Well, here it is. It's got 3 tabs. You can vote on laws to push through civics as international laws. This will force the opponents to take heavy penalties or simply take up your civics. It can really ruin an empire. Doctrines are where you can throw in your influence to unlock economic, geopolitical, order-based, or social benefits or effects. This one's really fascinating. I haven't had much of a chance to play around with the doctrines. They can be a bit of an influence sink, but very helpful in that it interlaces with the changing of laws and the new role that independent peoples play as well. Their ideology and how you relate to theirs is more important, arguably. The final tab on the screen is the International Crisis Panel after we move through these doctrines. The International Crisis Panel is sort of a place where those one-on-one disputes that you might be raging about in an embassy can play out on the global stage. It plays out similarly, as you can see, to the Laws tab, whereby you can put your support, your international sway, behind a certain party. This can also be really powerful, because of course this can be leveraging demands like ceding territories or cities, or paying huge amounts of cash. I end up mostly bankrupt for the whole run, thanks to somebody using this against me. However, early on I had a lot of sway, thanks to all my leverage and diplomacy and power, and I was able to also bribe people, using the leverage that I collected on the map, to convert it into international sway. This is another way that diplomatic empires will excel, by being able to use all of their units to gather leverage, and not just the specific diplomat unit. They'll be able to collect more, and therefore bribe more enemies, and get more sort of sway or clout on this global stage. Speaking of the global stage, there are 2 more players to enter. In the industrial era, it's the Scouts. Another sciencey one, but arguably more of a catch-up culture than anything else, plus 10%, or sorry, a 10% reduction cost in technology per empire that's already researched it, some science from your agreements, and a district that provides an okay amount of science, but plus 2 science on research quarters. So if you're building up a scientific empire and playing catch-up, they're a great pick. They also have a gunner unit with a kilt, so I mean, come on people, what's not to love? Will they compare to the other powerhouses in the industrial era? Time will tell, and I'll be sure to update you if you want to see that in future. Let me know down below. I'm keen to see your thoughts on the role of Humankind content. And lastly, we have the Singaporeans. I love Humankind. Don't forget. Singaporeans are in the contemporary era. They are again a jack of all trades, master of none with their communal housing district. Their trait provides stability per number of attached territories on the capital, very true to life, Singaporean kind of city-state feeling, and that plays through into the rest of their effects as well. They have a militia buff, absorb city cost reduction, and their unique unit here is indeed city militia. It's reservists. If you don't know, these are the units that come out, the peasants or the people who normally live in the city, to defend a city when it's attacked. So you don't control these, you can't build these, they're just there as a home guard. This is brilliant and perfectly on theme. I really like the whole design of the Singaporean culture. It's really fascinating. As I hinted at earlier, there are also some new units in this update, including spies and diplomats. Often, spies can or will be ambushed, and so it can be difficult to pull off their effects, but you can use them to track down enemy armies, or siphon enemy districts, and provide a whole load of other little impacts. The diplomats are more peaceful. They're kind of your leverage gatherers if you're not playing as a diplomatic culture. Of course, anybody can build them, and they can cross borders, whereas military units, of course, usually can't. Those are the main roles of the two new units. I have a little bit of footage and experience with them, but before I go ahead and provide any more tips and tricks, I'd like to have a bit more time with the game and with the full expansion in its release version. Either way, it has provided a whole load of interesting things for me to reflect on, and some more changes to show as well, of course. I'll be sure to provide a full update when the full patch notes come out and I can get my hands on it, but there are, of course, the things that we know and love that come with Humankind updates. Not just the new cultures and the wonderful soundtracks that come with them, but also new things like wonders for us to build. I've got some footage of those in a minute. And the new diplomatic culture type, of course, comes with the other bells and whistles that you would expect. It has its own era star. There are now additional era stars in Humankind, and you'll be able to earn those stars by gathering leverage from around the map. So not only does it play a role in influencing people on a one-on-one level through the new embassy, or maybe converting it into bribes at the international stage to get more international sway on those overarching measures, but it also contributes to era stars. And of course, as many of you will probably already know, and I know I don't need to tell most of you this if you're watching this video, once you collect a certain number of era stars and move through to the next era, you're good to go to grab your next culture, to grab your next unique building, whatever it may be. And so having these new ones in the game and having them collected by all units within diplomatic cultures, not just their diplomat unit, I know it could be a little confusing, but hopefully you're sticking with me. They may be able to span across the map and grab a whole load more leverage. They should be able to. The question is, will that amount be enough to put this culture type above the rest? And will it be strong enough to convince players to pick it over something that might be more of an upfront wham-bam benefit? The Diplomat affinity was something I had a lot of fun playing around with, while the AI absolutely dogged on me in this game, by the way. I have to admit, I wasn't trying super hard because I was trying to move through to each culture so I could get this footage to provide this video for you in time before the update came out. It's been a busy day at work, I'm sorry. This one is kind of late. But either way, I've managed to capture a little bit of everything and get my backside handed to me by the AI. Is this an indication that the AI is stronger in this update? I'm not sure, but one thing that I did notice was the AI was leveraging a lot against me. They were, say, demanding that I convert to their religion, and then using a leverage action to force me to make a decision at the end of the turn. And then they would repeat that every turn. And so I was being bombarded. I just had to cave and say yes, of course, eventually. It'll be really fascinating. The Congress of Humankind Wonder is a fascinating one too. Plus 50% international sway on Empire. That is, of course, the new cultural wonder in the final era. Stadium not, I believe, but somewhat older anyway. We also have some very interesting effects coming out of stability and influence from a variety of new wonders and cultures as well, of course. Influence plays a much wider role across the board in bringing neutral tribes or AI city-states, which is kind of what they are now, in, and a whole load of other things. The Palace of Versailles also helps with that leverage action cost. This one can be built much earlier in the game, so diplomat cultures will probably want to jump on this. You should be able to use your leverage to apply economic sanctions in the end game, reduce the opponent's war support in the early game, and a variety of other interventions in between. There were, of course, a load of other small changes that were really nice quality of life ones, I noticed. Loads of ones to the UI, also to accommodate some of the new features. Anyway, that is everything that you need to know about the new Humankind DLC expansion. This is a first look. And if you'd like to have a longer first look, you might want to tune into my Twitch streams this week. Got something very special for you. I'll see you then.